Negotiations, they know that if you give me your afternoon, I will give you hard facts.
Well done, Sandra, on all you do, going beyond the headlines and focusing on the facts.
I am Sandra Ezekwesili, and these are your hard facts. Ooh, what a weekend, am I right? What a weekend. It was packing back to back of action theme. I feel like because I wasn't at work on Friday, everything just decided to go to, and a nice place. Lagos. Good afternoon. I'm Sandra Ezekwesili, and these are your hard facts. First hard fact of the day. We don't know how many confirmed COVID cases there were over the weekend. Due to the federal government's ban on Twitter, NCDC stopped tweeting the daily results, and they also have not updated the results on their Instagram, and their website has total figures from the start of the outbreak. So I cannot give you that information, unfortunately. Second hard fact of the day, Governor Keredolu says all Amotekun state commands should work together to protect the Southwest from militias supporting herdsmen. That's, of course, in the aftermath of the horrific attack on Igangang over the weekend, Lagos. You better join the 1 million Lagosians who listen to hard facts because they cannot be wrong, huh? Let's start with the big weekend. We'll talk about the federal government's Twitter ban. That's all we're going to talk about today on the big weekend. We'll talk about the legality of it. I have two lawyers who are joining me on the show. We'll talk about the effects on civil rights. Serap will be joining me. And then we'll talk about the impact on the tech ecosystem. I'll have the co-founder of Tech Hive to discuss that, as well as to explain the NCC's regulatory environment. So it's a packed show. Checkpoint today, Sandra Ezekwesili will bring you something great as always. And on the big hard fact, we'll talk some more about the Twitter ban. This time, we're going to focus mainly on the impact on business and tech. I'll be joined by the Paradigm Initiative. I'll also be joined by a lawyer. Now, news updates will come your way on the hour every hour. You can watch us live on Facebook, Nigeria Info 99.3. We're also streaming live on YouTube, Nigeria Info FM. Now, of course, you know the NBC, our regulator, has said to us that we cannot use Twitter anymore. So that means that you cannot get in touch with us via Twitter. Apologies about that. But hey, we've got WhatsApp, we've got Facebook, we've got YouTube. And if you're listening to us using the mobile app, you can simply dial that chat box. There's a chat box at the top right-hand corner of your app. If you click on that small message-like icon, it will tell you to either call the studio or WhatsApp the studio or send us a picture or send us an email. You can get in touch like that. All right? Okay. News updates will come your way at the top of every hour. If you want to win on just a minute today, you need to listen to every single thing we say on the show today. Like I said, Lagos, I am Sandra Ezekwesili. Let's get started with the big weekend.
The big weekend.
Do you accept the federal government's reasons for the ban on Twitter? Do you accept it? Is the ban legal? Does the Attorney General have the legal right to prosecute people for tweeting? It was a big weekend, Lagos. Let's talk about it. You are already talking about the ban. That's all you've talked about today. But we're going to talk about it now from the legal angle. Joining me to have this conversation, all from legal positions, taking a look at all the legal positions being cited, are two lawyers. First, we have Israel Olawumi. Welcome to Hard Facts.
Good afternoon, Sandra. Thank you for having me.
I also have a friend of the show returning, Ilemona Onoja. Welcome back to Hard Facts.
Hi, Sandra.
Good to have you on the show. Ilemona, I'll start with you. Alton, the Association of Licensed Telecoms Operators, has complied with the NCC's block order. Alton says that the Communications Act of 2003 requires them to do this on national interest grounds. Ilemona, is the NCC on solid legal ground here based on the Communications Act and the license terms of telcos?
The answer to that is a resounding no. There's absolutely nothing in the NCC Act, in any subsidiary legislation, in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria that gives the federal government, any of his agencies, any of his agents, any of his proxies, whatever they're called, all right, be able to take the action that has been taken, which is the complete block off of a medium for dissemination of information. That is guaranteed. The right to own a medium for the dissemination of information is guaranteed by Section 39, I think Section 3 of the Federal Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. There's nowhere in the NCC Act or indeed in the Constitution where NCC is empowered, not just NCC, the federal government is empowered to do something on something as vague as national interest grounds. And statements of national interest grounds highlighted in this action taken against Twitter is really emphasized by the fact that there's no similar action taken against Facebook, which did the exact same thing. Delete the comments of the person. It shows you that it really isn't just about the deletion of that comment. It is about something more than that.
I wonder if Israel agrees with you. Israel,
I was waiting for him to finish up.
Okay, Israel, tell me your thoughts. Go ahead.
The thing is, it is no gainsaying that the right to express one's opinion and views is a constitutionally provided right.
Sorry, can you speak up, please?
Oh.
Yeah. What did you say?
I'm going to. Unfortunately, it's a tech problem, so it's not coming from Israel's end. But I'll summarize what he says for you, Lemon. Apologies about that. Israel, go ahead.
Okay. Section 39(2) of the Constitution of Nigeria says that every person shall be entitled to own, establish, and operate any medium for dissemination of information, ideas, and opinion.
Right.
That's the principal law of Nigeria.
Right.
In the same vein, Article 9 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights says that every individual shall have the right to receive information and have the right to express and disseminate opinions within the law.
Right.
You see, these rights to express one's opinion is a constitutionally provided law. Although it's not absolute, it has, instances where it can be derogated from, but they are expressly provided for in the law. And as the Supreme Court held in Asari Dokubo and Federal Republic of Nigeria, that these rights are so supreme that a government body cannot derogate from these rights on its whim wherever it does. And with respect to this Twitter ban, I agree with the previous speaker to an extent that it's not founded or it's not provided for by any law in Nigeria. Even if you want to be sympathetic towards the federal government, if you check the NCC Act, that's the Nigerian Communications Commission Act, the ground by which they can, sustain a platform that allows people express their opinion within the ambit of law. You check Section 148 of the NCC Act that says that the commission, on the occurrence of a public emergency or the interest of public safety, can withdraw either totally or partially the use of any service or network facilities from any licensee person to the general public. Then you ask yourself, what amounts to public emergency or public safety here? Is it because the president posted some messages that expressly, that did not just, insult the citizenry of Nigerians or a cross-section of Nigerians, but also violated the platform's rules and regulations? So how does it amount to public safety or public emergency here? So the ban is highly illegal and unconstitutional on every facet.
All right. So Ilemona, Israel agrees with you and then goes on to say that he thinks that the ban is highly unconstitutional. And then he quotes some parts of the Nigerian Communications Act. I also read the Communications Act. I read it myself on Saturday. And the term national interest isn't given any precise definition there. I also looked at the Interpretation Act and I found no default definition for national interest. interest. And Israel also doesn't understand exactly what they mean when they're talking about national interest. So, Lemon, I have to ask you, how is national interest defined or interpreted under the law? Or is it completely at the discretion of a regulator or whoever in government is taking action? Israel also mentioned the Asari Dokubo case and mentioned the Supreme Court ruling on that case as one of the things that can be argued when you're debating this issue. Ilamona.
So it goes back to the Constitution. Typically, what happens is that when a law defines an interest or a concept, so to speak, right? You go to the defining law. In the absence of a definition in any law, what you do is that you go to the judiciary. Our Constitution provides in, I think it is Section 6, elementary law, that the judiciary exists for determining the rights, obligations, privileges of Nigerian citizens anywhere in the country. In fact, citizens anywhere in the country, whether real or corporate, to determine the extent of their rights, their liberties, their freedoms, and so on and so forth. In Asari Dokubo versus the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Supreme Court said that the authority to determine what constitutes national security or national interest is the judiciary, not the executive.
I see.
So the belief that someone can by himself stand up and say this thing is in national security interest actually baffles me when the person who is saying that is a lawyer who went to the same law school that we all went to. I don't understand. Then let's now come back to the hypocritical double standard that the federal government is emphasizing and is carrying out in its activity. 2 years ago, or was it 3, Mr. Chetan Wanze was on program on Nigeria Info, I think it was, or was it Cool FM? On a radio station. While that program was going on, the NBC yanked him off that program because he was talking about the Nigerian Civil War. And the program was shut down. Right?
Okay.
Here is the same NBC saying that the president is allowed to make those references when it doesn't believe that its own citizens have the right to make those references. You have to be able to do one of two things. You are either going to eat it or you throw it away. You cannot say that some people have the right to have this conversation in a manner steward to suit their own interests, and other people don't have that right. That is not justice. That is not equity. And to finalize and to highlight the complete and utter failure of the federal government on this matter and then on several matters, the reason why we cannot approach a court immediately today to go and say this action of the federal government is not in keeping with the provisions of our Constitution, is not in keeping with the declarations of our court, all the way up to the Supreme Court, is because the federal government has failed, refused, and neglected to end an 8-week strike of the judiciary.
Okay.
So it is a failure that compounds another failure.
Let me come back to Israel. Israel, apart from the instruction from the NCC, has there been any other official directive from the government for the enforcement of this ban? I'm asking this question because the Attorney General's office is saying that they will prosecute anybody in Nigeria using Twitter. Can a directive from the NCC to the companies
Sandra,
it regulates be used to prosecute citizens who are not under NCC's jurisdiction?
Sandra, it's no gain saying that the federal government can regulate companies and service providers operating in Nigeria.
Right.
In fact, telecommunications is an exclusive legislative item that the federal government, to the exclusion of all other spheres of government, has total control over. But the thing is, the Constitution is clear as to who makes law, the arm of government that makes laws. The legislature is the arm of government that makes laws, and not the federal, and not the executive. what the Attorney General of the Federation has said via that circular he issued, stating that all law enforcement agencies should arrest and prosecute those who Twitter users, has no force of law at all. Because according to the provision of the Constitution, Section 3610 to be exact, no one can be convicted for any criminal offense that is not contained in any written law. And this has been long established, even as far back as 1961 in the case of Aoko versus Pagbe, where the Supreme Court, in that case, a woman was charged for with adultery in the southern part of Nigeria. And in the southern part of Nigeria, adultery is not an offense, unlike what obtains in the north. If it were in the north, yes, the penal code provides that, yes, adultery is an offense. But in the southern part, adultery is not an offense. So the Supreme Court tells that since adultery is not an offense in the southern part of Nigeria, one cannot be said to be convicted on that so-called offense created by figments of imagination of whosoever is prosecuting to that end. And here, in fact, very recently, the Supreme Court still restated the same position in the case of Bode George and FRN. In that case, that was in 2013. In that case, Bode George was alleged of contract splitting and conspiracy to split contracts. The Supreme Court still said that no law in Nigeria criminalizes contract splitting. And when I'm talking about law here, I'm talking about an enactment passed by the National Assembly, which takes me back to my earlier position that it is the legislature that makes law and not the executive, which the Attorney General of the Federation is a part of.
All right, then.
So, law here refers to an enactment passed by the National Assembly or the House of Assembly of a state.
I see.
And if I go further, the Supreme Court still held that a mere administrative circular cannot create an offense. So that one that was issued by the Attorney General cannot be, it cannot be such that has the backing of law that anyone who uses Twitter can now be, punished under the law. No, it's not wrong. In fact, the law still says that where one breaches an executive order, it does not amount to a crime. In the case of Faith Okafor versus Governor of Lagos State, the lady in question, the Faith Okafor woman, I think she breached the environmental sanitation rules of Lagos by moving within the period where environmental sanitation was going on, and she was arrested and prosecuted to that end. And the court held that it was an executive order. Where one breaches an executive order, it does not amount to a crime. And the person cannot be prosecuted. And in fact, in this particular instance, there is no law at all.
So that's my next question. That's where I'm coming next.
But my fear, Sandra, is about a mischievous direction as this is that. Although when it gets to the court, when the courts open, it will only amount to a prosecutorial misadventure. But the fear is that all of these overzealous law enforcement agents can just speak on it and start, abusing
people
human rights of innocent citizens.
Okay, which brings me to my next question. And Ilemana, you're going to respond. No.
I want to just buttress the point you made.
Hold on, it's part of the same thing, right? The question is a follow-up to the points he was making, right? Now, when asked what law these prosecutions would take place under, the AGF spokesman said that people will find out when they are brought to court. As lawyers, Ilemana, I'll start with you. What do you think about that statement?
Okay, so very quickly, let me reiterate something that Israel said. In the case of Bode George, that Israel says that Bode George against Federal Republic of Nigeria, it's very interesting to note that the prosecutor on behalf of the federal government is the current Minister of State for Labor and Productivity, Mr. Festus Keyamo, SAN.
Right.
So he's very well aware
Right.
of the decision of the Supreme Court in that case.
Right.
The decision went against him. Now, in direct answer to your question, sorry, remind me your question, yeah?
As lawyers, how do you feel about the spokesperson of the AGF saying that people will find out when they are brought to court what law these prosecutions will take place under?
Section 36 of the Constitution says that at the point of arresting somebody, not even at the point of charging him,
I see.
at the point of arresting someone, you have to tell the person the crime that the person committed. And not only that, the Administration of Criminal Justice Act says the same thing. You have to tell somebody at the point of arrest in a language that you understand the reason for the arrest. It's not arresting, it's detaining, and then when you get to court,
You're now telling him what he did.
You're not telling him the reason for his arrest. No. Our Constitution, this is what calls the competence, if you will, of the people who are saying these things into question. It's elementary law. This is 200 level law in the university. 200 level law. How are people supposedly speaking on behalf of a senior advocate, on behalf of the Attorney General of the Federation, saying these things? You arrest someone, and then when the person gets to court, the person will find out why he was arrested. Makes no sense.
Now, I'm going to wrap up by asking Israel this question, and feel free to also chip in when Israel is done. Ilemona, the House of Reps Minority Caucus and the Nigerian Bar Association both say that they'll challenge the ban in court on constitutional grounds. How does the ban match up against constitutional rights to freedom of expression, freedom to disseminate ideas, and freedom of assembly? Israel.
Yes. These are clear constitutional provisions. They are clear fundamental rights.
Right.
In the sense that everyone, in reference to the different constitutional provisions and even the African Charter that I quoted, that I cited before now,
right.
We all have a right to express ourselves, express our opinions within the law. We all have a right to freely associate, and assemble peacefully. This is just an attempt to gag us. This is just an attempt to stifle us from exercising these are not just God-given rights, but constitutionally provided rights. These rights are even globally recognized. So it's just very, very sorry. It's an unfortunate situation to have a constitutional democracy have this kind of passive directions in place. It is very, very pitiable. It is quite pitiable.
Ilemona.
I could align myself with everything you just said. What we have is a government who is slowly and predictably because everything that has been predicted about this government and its shrinking of civic spaces and its violation of the constitutional rights and freedoms of the Nigerian people have come to pass one after. Just another step on a long journey that has seen the constant, predictable, but yet brutal violation of the constitutional rights and freedoms of Nigerian people. It's deeply disturbing. It's deeply disturbing. And the worst thing is the possibility that things can only indeed get worse.
Let's
That's
hope
the
not.
worst thing about it.
Let's
the
hope
willingness that being people are arrogating rights and powers and authorities to themselves that simply, under no stretch of the law, do they have the right to do. Gosh. Otherwise, be brutal with anybody who says to them that cannot do those things.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on Hard Facts today. Lagos, we've had Israel Olawumi on the show. He's a lawyer. Ilemona Onoja is also a lawyer, and they've both talked to us about the legal angle of this Twitter ban. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on Hard Facts.
Thank you very much.
All right, Lagos, let's talk. I want to hear from you, right? Calling with your opinions about what you've just heard from my lawyers at the moment while we give a call to our next guests on today's big weekend. So we're expecting Ridwan Oloyede. We're also expecting Kolawole Oluwadare from Serap. So we're going to try and get in touch with them as quickly as we can. In the meantime, we've got Facebook. where you can get in touch. Facebook is Nigeria Info 99.3. WhatsApp is 080-959-75805. 080-959-75805. We seem to be having some connectivity issues with our WhatsApp. So, Chisom, sort that out. Get tech to get on that and fix that problem for us. But in the meantime, I can read your comments off of Facebook. I should tell you, by the way, that the federal government just finished a meeting with the envoys of different countries in Nigeria, so the US, the UK, the EU, and they're saying that they are willing to lift the ban on the condition that the ban on the condition that Twitter acts can be used responsibly. Whatever that means. So we had Geoffrey Onyama, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, speaking at the meeting with some envoys, and he said that the condition would be responsible use of the social media, and that really has to be it. He continues by saying, quote, "We're not saying that Twitter is threatening the country or any such thing. Why we've taken this measure is to stop them to be used as platforms for destabilization and facilitation of criminality or encouragement of criminalities." So you had the US at that meeting, the UK at that meeting, Canada at that meeting, and the European Union. And when they asked Onyama, well, do we have an idea when the ban will be lifted, he said, well, that we don't know for now. So that's the update on that story. That's the latest on that story. When we know more, you will know more, obviously. We've got Ridwan Oloyede on the line at the moment, and we're also going to have Kolawole. We're going to have Kolawole from Serap, Kolawole Oluwadare, that is, from Serap. And they're both also going to be talking to us about this same Twitter ban. So while we talk with Ridwan, we will connect with Kolawole. Ridwan is the co-founder of Tech Hive Advisory. Ridwan, thank you so much for joining us on Hard Facts.
Hi, thank you, Sandra. Hi, good afternoon.
Good to have you here. Now, among other things, your company helps tech companies navigate the law. Does the NCC have the right to blacklist a website or an OTT service? And if so, walk us through the legal process that, what the legal process is supposed to be. Walk us through it.
All right. Hi, Sandra. Thank you again. Under the regulatory purview of the Nigerian Communication Commission,
right,
there are a couple of legislation and legal framework that you have.
Right.
They are enacted specifically by the NCC itself.
Right.
Of course, the NCC Act itself empowers it to do something. So under those specific legal frameworks, it also has some regulatory powers
right,
to actually do some of these things. But then, when it comes to how they should typically work about it, they typically just need an instruction from the commission. But then, there are also established framework before this can be done. So you have things around, if you look at Section 148 of the NCC Act, for example, it says things around public interest, it says things around also in cases of emergency.
Right.
And if you look at some of the sector-specific framework that the NCC has enacted to specifically regulate internet access service providers, it has some of these provisions. But the challenge with this provision has always been that some of these things could be vague. Mm-hmm. We also need some sort of an independent oversight rule of the court to define some of these words before you can have a regulator making some of these specific instructions and deciding to either invoke the power to either disrupt network connections or whether partially or fully.
I see. Okay. Now, the presidency says that the ban was a response to Twitter's refusal to check fake news and divisive rhetoric. I mean, you have Geoffrey Onyama, the foreign minister, saying to the different envoys he was in a meeting with this afternoon that they would have to find a way to for Twitter to be used responsibly. Is there a case to be made here that Twitter needs to be more proactive in handling offensive or dangerous speech coming from Nigerian citizens in the way they handled that tweet from the president?
Okay, so there has been a lot of conversation around the role of the liabilities of intermediaries, these platforms, about how they should actually regulate the content on their on their platforms.
Right.
We've seen so many conversations across the divide, whether if they put the same efforts that they use in European countries, if they use the same efforts in Africa during election period or during period of crisis like this. Okay. One thing that is clear is the fact that information disorder is a very big problem in Nigeria. It's also a big problem in every part of the world. And when you speak about user responsibility, while the platforms have responsibility to sort of regulate or control some content on their platforms based on the rules that they have, throwing that bulk of responsibility on the platforms about how users can be responsible, it's not that simple to. A user can decide to be responsible. A user might decide not to be responsible. Also, a content of a tweet, for example, and depending on the context, simply the way people say things like one freedom fighter could be some rebels, depending on who is defining it. So these are very, very not so very easy issues that, especially if you look at this specific context, Twitter is not the only platform where misinformation is being spread.
Right.
Citizens are also not the only source of disinformation or whatever form of information disorder that we're addressing.
Right.
So I mean, it's across so many other platforms. If you go to WhatsApp, it's you see even some of these people deploying new strategies to see how can we actually combat information disorder. So the question one way you want to ask, why the focus on Twitter where there are other platforms equally where information disorder is a problem?
Right.
But then things keeps unraveling. We're seeing new things, and of course, we're just waiting to learn more and waiting for the direction of the government, and of course, see how they actually intend to regulate this thing. If genuinely, what the problem truly is information disorder rather than the deletion of a tweet or whatever it is.
Of the president. NESG has said that this ban will devastate businesses. On the morning show, Sheriff, my colleague, was talking to Lagosians about what the effect of this ban has been on their businesses in the 3 days that Twitter has been banned in Nigeria. What have been some of the knock-on effects of this ban on regular Nigerians, Ridwan? Do you know? Regular Nigerians who are not engaging in hate speech or fake news or information disorder or incitement. What has been the knock-on effect for them?
Okay, to get a very close picture of this, there's the net block cost to calculate the cost of internet disruption or network disruption in countries.
Right.
And we see the numbers have been bounded around weekly, hourly, daily, monthly if it runs into a month. And the truth is, Twitter has emerged not just as a platform to give people a voice, but has also emerged as a platform to connect people to opportunities for them to trade, for them to put out not just their services, but also products. So literally, when we take access away from the companies who want to exhibit what they do, to creatives who want to put out the content they are creating, to people in the ICT space who are also engaged through using this platform. If we literally take these things away from them, the ability to connect to the global audience, we literally take the means away. And what these things might be when it comes to what the economic impact is, we might not be able to put this into numbers. We might first, if you put it into individual context, businesses whose API, for example, is built on Twitter, for example, they literally might not be able to do something if they are literally going directly by what the directive says. So if you look at all of these things, sustenance, people whose livelihood is built on having this platform as a voice, if you literally take their means and you take the sustainability away. So it's in terms of what the economic impact assessment is, we might not necessarily be able to precisely put it into what numbers is, but the net block cost shutdown tool gives us an idea about what this could mean for us economically. Now,
you have businesses and citizens who may have been affected by the ban. Do they have the required standing to ask the NCC, the telcos, or even the courts about the legal basis for the ban or for some redress in any way?
Okay, so the provision of the Constitution is very clear around what constitutes a crime.
Right.
It must be written in the law.
Right.
It must be, and when you say a law, it means a law that has gone through the legislative cycle and, of course, get the assent of the president or whether the legislature decides to pass it if the president declines. So in this context, it's pretty much very difficult to ascertain what specific legal instrument the government is relying on to make an executive directive in that sense.
Incidentally, I had lawyers before you joined us, and the lawyers have said that there's no legal instrument that this is being hinged upon.
Exactly. I mean, it's very difficult to assess. There are tweets bit here and there from Section 148 of the NCC Act that empowers the NCC to make this directive. However, the directive itself was not made by the NCC itself. It was by the Ministry of Information who did this. So also, if they are relying on the derogations available under the Constitution, which is Section 45, to say public safety and all of that, this directive itself is not a law in the sense of what a legal framework in a reasonable democratic setting the Constitution concedes.
Right.
And if you're doing it also on the basis of maybe specific sector instruments that the NCC has put out there, it's really difficult to put out what specific framework the government is relying on. And with this, what it simply means is if the court is open, for example, of course, we expect to see people going to court to actually raise constitutional issues, whether even at local level, or maybe even going as far as regional courts, to actually ask if the executive directive is actually infringement of the constitutional guarantees under the Constitution and also the international human rights norms that Nigeria has subscribed to.
Now, I have to bring it home to Lagos, where Governor Sanwo-Olu says that Twitter and the federal government will need to sit down and agree to new terms of engagement. You have Geoffrey Onyama also saying that, Twitter, they'll lift the ban on Twitter if Twitter meets certain conditions. Now, do you agree, or do you think that this will end up happening? And what do you think those terms should look like if they do come to some terms? Geoffrey Yama's press statement was quite vague on what exactly they required of Twitter to merit a lift of the ban. Sanwo-Olu himself was also very vague when he was talking about what these rules of engagement will look like. But you're the expert here. What do you think it could look like? What could those terms look like? Is this something that you even see happening?
So transparency and accountability is a very big component of how to also regulate liabilities, liabilities of intermediaries, and also regulating these platforms.
Right.
So we have the Manila Principles, which is an international instrument defining how to actually regulate liabilities of intermediaries, to what extent you can actually do all of these things. And these things are built on human rights values.
Right.
So if we want transparency and accountability in terms of use and also in terms of regulation, it swings both ways.
Right.
Is Twitter and other platforms, are they doing enough? Especially when we look at period of electoral cycle.
Right.
Information disorder, how much are they actually deploying fact-checking tools to actually flag some of these things? How much of response do they have also locally to also ensure that some of their responses also address local context? So there are so many legislative proposals across the world about how to specifically regulate intermediaries and also regulate the actions of platforms. But more importantly is the fact that these issues are always built around transparency, they are built around accountability, they are built around right respecting. But also more importantly is the fact that if you have an issue, there is always an independent oversight to address if there is truly an issue or otherwise. So these are some of the things that we put out there. Also, there must also be a place for notification. If you have qualms with a content that is being put out and maybe it's capable of disrupting, there should be an open channel where we can actually engage at governmental level, at fact-checking level. Also, for the platforms too, there should be some sort of way they should engage. So, in a way, platforms need to do more in terms of having local players on ground to address specifically some local context. But more importantly is the fact that whatever legislative proposal that will regulate intermediaries and platforms, it has to be built on international human rights norms such that people can get notified. There's a place for independent oversight of the courts or maybe some other body that is actually independent. And of course, we may start also looking at some specific context to address our own local nuances.
Ridwan Oloyede, ladies and gentlemen, he's a co-founder of Tech Hive Advisory. Ridwan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sandra. It's a pleasure.
Lagos, let's talk, shall we? Unfortunately, we couldn't have the Deputy Director at SERAP join us. SERAP is the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project. They're actually planning to take legal action against the ban. Kolawole Oluwadare was supposed to join us, but unfortunately, he couldn't make the show. We're going to try and see if he'll join us at 5 p.m. because remember, we're continuing this conversation at 5. But right now, Lagos, let's hear from you. What do you think about the effects of the Twitter ban? ban. What do you think about everything that our guests have said about the legality? So you heard from two lawyers when we started, and you've heard from somebody whose bread and butter is tech policy, digital policy, tech advisory, period. You've heard all the things he said. What do you think? Women, call me on 01465 7190. 01465 7190. Men, call me on 0700 993. We've got WhatsApp. WhatsApp is 080-959-75805. We're still having some technical difficulties with WhatsApp, and unfortunately, it's not working as great as I would like. So please get tech to fix my WhatsApp so we can use WhatsApp on the show. We've got Don Baba in Ogba. Don Baba, welcome. How are you?
I'm fine. And you, my sister?
I'm very well. You've got 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I've listened to your guest, Alson. But to be honest with you, Nigerian government needs to do a lot. You know, it's not just regulate or ban their Twitter. If you take very well, when you give people opportunity to talk, they will express themselves. Even on your show, some people, including myself, some are, spread fake news unknown to us. Are you aware of that?
Okay.
So the government needs to do a lot. Why I say government has to do a lot is that look at the killing that is going on in Nigeria. Whenever you hear today there was a killing so and so place, you don't want to know how many or what led to this. You assume maybe so and so tribe killed. What has government done about all these